Welcome to the Be Well at USask podcast. My name's Peter Headley. I serve as the Director of Student Affairs and Services at the university. This podcast is for all members of the University of Saskatchewan community. Each week, members of the USask community will join me to share ideas and provide guidance on all aspects of being well. And we'll be highlighting campus initiatives and resources designed to engage and support you. In these challenging times, we hope the ideas and information we share will help. In this episode, I'm going to be talking to Sarah Sotvedt, the Manager of Student Life. We're going to be talking about how the Student Life team on campus has responded to the COVID-19 situation and the ways in which they're keeping students living in residence safe and supported at this time. Well, welcome to the podcast, Sarah. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Peter. I really appreciate you having me here.
So can you start off telling me a little about your role and the work that your team typically does to support students?
Absolutely. So my role is the Manager of Student Life with Residence. And so in Residence, we are split into two different sections. We have an operations side of the department and we have a student life side of the department. Our operations team deals with all of the administrative things that have to do with students living in residence, such as agreements and financial pieces. And the student life team focuses on the student experience. So making sure that our students are supported, helping them if they're in crisis or distress, as well as helping them manage through conflict and learn how to manage conflict on their own, and working with student conduct. So making sure that they're behaving in a way that's appropriate for the community. And the other thing we do that's a big part of our program is running the student leadership program called the RA program. And the RAs are peer supporters who live in residence and hopefully help the students with their time at university.
I think it can often be a surprise to people how much education work you're actually involved with. This is the life education work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that. We really take an approach that there is so much to be learned outside of the classroom for university students. And some residences are actually built on a punitive process for their conduct, which means they rely heavily on fining students or punishing students when they've done something wrong. We go in the other direction and we rely heavily on an educational route called creative sanctions, where we try to work with the student to come up with a sanction that's mutually agreed upon that allows them to learn from the experience and hopefully not to repeat those behaviors. So outside of the programming that we offer, which is also educationally based, we do a lot of education one-on-one with our students.
And I know that you also have a Counsellor-in-Residence, is that right?
Yes, we do. He's been a great addition to our residence team. So we share the Counsellor-in-Residence with the Student Affairs and Outreach team, but he works half of his time as our specific counselor, which means that students in residence can see someone almost immediately when they need him. And they're also able to visit him in residence. So students, for example, who live in Voyageur Place can go to a counselor in their pajamas if they want to, which makes it very accessible.
I think probably quite a lot of people in the world are going to a counselor in their pajamas right now. So, well, let's turn to that, because I know this has been a very challenging period for everyone on campus, but I know it's been particularly difficult for you and your team. And given the concerns about COVID transmission, some universities, one of their first steps was to close the residences entirely to students. How has the university and your team responded?
So I'm glad that you brought that up, actually, because we made the decision not to close down our residences, and it's a decision that people haven't fully understood since the time that COVID kind of started affecting our university heavily. So I'll just explain that here. Some universities did choose to close down their residences, and that's because residence is a very high-risk environment for COVID. Similar to the situations that we're seeing in long-term care homes and things like that, you have multiple people living in very close quarters. In some areas, they're sharing common areas like living rooms and kitchens and bathrooms. So, of course, there is more risk for spread in that type of community. So I do understand why some universities shut down their residences. We decided early on that we were not comfortable doing that because we knew that we had, first of all, a very large international student population, many of whom, first of all, couldn't go home because their borders were closed. And second of all, probably couldn't afford to go home even if their borders were open in a lot of cases. And so we wanted to be here to continue supporting them, because if we shut down, where would they go? Where would they live? Where would they call home during this incredibly stressful time? But in addition to that, we also know that we had domestic students who, for example, we have We have students in some minority groups who have told us that because of the situations they come from in their home communities or families, they don't feel safe going home. We also had domestic students with immunocompromised relatives who didn't feel that they could keep their own family members safe if they went home. So we decided to stay open for all of those people. That being said, we did send something out saying that we really wanted to make sure that students who could go home safely and happily do that. And we issued refunds to everybody to help facilitate that move, to make it an easy choice for them. And the reason we did that is because the fewer people we keep in residence, the better chance we have of controlling the spread of COVID. Some people took that messaging and kind of misunderstood it and thought that we were saying everyone has to go home. And since that time, we've faced a lot of confusion from students who think that at some point we're going to say, well, even though you couldn't go home safely, we want you to leave too. So I'd like to take this opportunity to say that's absolutely not the route that we have taken. We are here to support the students that needed to stay. The other thing that I can explain is that we did shut down our dorm style residence. So that's Voyageur Place. And that's because in that area, students live in two bed rooms. So there's two of them in very close quarters, and they share bathrooms and kitchenettes and lounges with all the rest of the students on their floor. And so we felt that that environment was too high risk to keep open. So those students went home if they could go home. And if they couldn't, they were asked to move or required to move to one of our apartment style residences. So everyone who needed to stay was accommodated, just in a way that made it a little bit safer for COVID-19.
And I guess that's a critical piece. And I know because I was sort of around some of those discussions about the importance of students being in their own space, recognizing some of the challenges around isolation that would come, and absolutely recognizing people's need to connect with one another. Sure. So what is the student experience like in residence right now?
So I would say it's definitely very different than the student experience that we are accustomed to and very proud to offer. And so obviously, I think we all feel badly for the whole world right now. And as part of that, I feel badly for our students because I can't say that the experience they're getting in residence right now is the one that I wanted them to have. We've had to shut down all of our common areas, which means they can't be using study lounges or social lounges, TV rooms to have TV parties, that kind of thing. We've also taken all of our regular programming offline. So anything that required students to come out to events, but also the reach outs that our student staff would often do, where they might be in a lobby and they might interact with 200 students in an evening, that's all gone. And we did all of that because there was no way for us to keep operating the way that we were and simultaneously control the spread of COVID-19. So those things are gone. So it does look different. It also looks like students self-isolating. We've required that all students that are living in residence currently self-isolate as best they can. We take all of our directives from the government and the Saskatchewan Health Authority, the law, etc. So in line with that, we've asked that all students stay in their units whenever possible, only going out to get groceries or for emergency reasons. And we've also issued a fine and eviction system to make sure that students are abiding by those rules. It wasn't something that we did lightly, and it wasn't something we wanted to do. But at the beginning, we were seeing a lot of students congregating and choosing to ignore the self-isolation rules we put in place. And unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity or the luxury of education in this situation, because one congregation too many can be the difference between COVID and not. So we put in place a system where if students break the rules, so if they have a guest over or if they congregate in a hallway with their friends or they break into a lounge that's closed, they get a $250 fine. And on the second time, they would be evicted from residence, because this is what we need to do to keep our entire community safe. Everything we've done has been in the name of safety in terms of the rules. I'll just stop there in case you have a question.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think that's a critically important piece, because I think, the quality of people's experience sometimes comes down to the things that they like and don't like, as opposed to the things that necessarily keep them safe. And I guess I would say, as far as we know, in terms of your action being validated, we haven't had any cases of COVID in residences, which is extraordinary, I guess, given that we started out with over 2,000 students in residences, I believe. So, I think that's a great credit to your team, but I think it also speaks to the importance of these kind of measures and students taking it seriously.
Thank you. We also have a robust protocol that we've developed, a 10-step protocol that we use anytime we get even a hint that a student might be experiencing symptoms consistent with COVID or have been in contact with somebody who was traveling. And so our coordinator on call, who's a member of my team and is on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year round, immediately responds to that student. And if we have any sense at all that the student even has had to call 811, maybe they're not even being tested, we immediately move them into a self-isolation unit. We've taken a number of units offline, not moved students into them to keep them as these self-isolation spaces. So that's also being done so that if there's any chance that someone does have COVID, they're immediately isolated to a space where they can be alone, even if they had roommates before. We also ask the roommates to self-isolate. So we're doing everything that we can to keep everyone safe. And I just wanted to make a note as well about the rest of the student experience. So obviously self-isolation and COVID is a big part of their experience right now, but we are still trying to find ways to communicate with our students as best we can. We have our coordinators and our RAs will do phone check-ins with students as opposed to in-person meetings. If we have students that maybe were struggling previously, or our students who are in self-isolation units, for example, we check in with all of them almost every day. We also are still doing programming. We're just doing it from a distance. So on Tuesday, we send out a letter called Tasty Tuesday with some cooking tips and videos and things like that. On Fridays, we send out the Husky Herald, which has programming that the students can do in the comfort of their home. Things like having a Netflix party with their neighbors, or maybe exercise ideas or ways that they can sleep and study better. And we're also producing videos every so often to try to reach out to our students who maybe aren't so enamored with the written material. So doing our best in that way. And then in terms of supports, we still have RAs available. They still hold the phone every night so students can get a hold of them from 7 p.m. until 7 a.m. We also have the coordinators still working, just doing things by phone, but they are available to respond in person. They have campus access, so they can respond in person if a student is in dire straits and really needs their help. And then we also have the Counselor-in-Residence, the faculty in residence. They're still responding to student issues as they come up and students who want to see them. So we're doing our best to create a system of support around our students.
Yeah, that all sounds great. I know that everyone's trying to be as flexible and learn ourselves in terms of the way we're delivering services. Well, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but when might students in residence expect to see some of the current measures lifted?
Yeah, so that's the big question that we're hearing from students as well. And I wish I had a black and white answer for you. As I said, we're taking all of our recommendations from the government, the SHA, groups like that, and of course the university. So right now, we're just waiting to find out what the university will decide in conjunction with the government's plan to reopen Saskatchewan. And that will make a big difference as to what residents will do moving forward. Right now, we're just taking things day by day. What I can say is that we're communicating with our students as frequently as possible. We do send communications out multiple times every week. At the beginning, we were communicating with them daily, and we've curbed that only because we don't want to overwhelm our students either. We can't really predict anything right now, but at the same time, we are planning as though we will be reopening. We are planning as though new students will be moving in the fall. However, we're planning for how do we continue in a world with the new normal? So how do we make residents a safe and fun place to live while simultaneously continuing to follow physical distancing and making sure that we can keep our community safe from the spread of COVID?
And presumably, now that it's warmed up and the sun has come out, that becomes even more challenging.
Yeah, certainly. I think there's always challenges, but I think we don't have a lot of control over what happens in the outdoor environment. So we're doing our best to just educate students as to how they can keep themselves safe, but also their responsibility for keeping the rest of the community safe.
Well, listen, I'm asking all guests to share one thing that they're doing to be well right now, maybe something that brings them joy or a sense of connection. Is there something you're doing that you're finding that helps at the moment?
Yeah, so I have a nightly Zoom standing date where I go on a video chat with my mother and our best family friend. And we usually play a game. Sometimes we'll craft. We do various things. And that's been helpful for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's really important to stay connected. And everyone talks about the value of connection, but until you start doing it frequently, you don't realize what a difference it makes during this time where we're all isolating. And the other thing is it gives me a bit of routine in my day. And that's something we've really tried to stress, that routine is very important right now. It can make things feel a lot more normalized, and it can really help you to get through these periods of isolation.
Is there a final thought that you'd want to share with listeners?
I guess just for our students who are listening, I have found it really helpful to hear my own boss say quite frequently to us that this will end. There will be a time where this will end. And so we hear from a lot of students that they feel isolated. They feel like this is never ending. And I understand, and it feels like that for me too. But I just want them to remember that there will be a tomorrow where we will live in the new normal, and it will be a little bit easier. And there will be a tomorrow, hopefully, where the new normal will look a lot like the old normal. We just have to be patient until we get there.
That's great. Thanks, Sarah. Well, listen, thank you so much. I know you're busy, but thanks for taking the time to speak with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Be Well at USask podcast with me, Peter Headley. And thanks again to Sarah for joining me and sharing. Students in residence can connect with the Student Life team by phone or by email. The links are listed in the podcast details. Please check in again for further episodes and more content related to being well at USask. Please subscribe and share this podcast. We're currently on YouTube and Spotify. We'd also love to hear from you. Please post comments and questions, and we'll look to include them in future episodes. Also, if there's a person you'd like to see as a guest or a topic you'd like us to cover, please let us know. In the next episode, as part of our series focusing on mental health during Mental Health Week in May 2020, I'm going to be talking to Dr. Alana Holt, who's a lead psychiatrist at the USask Student Wellness Centre. We're going to be talking about how the current COVID situation is affecting mental health in broad terms, the potential for an echo pandemic of mental health issues. And Alana and I also talk about some tips and strategies for managing your mental health now and in the future, as well as some opportunities that the current situation presents to improve your mental health. So until next time, stay safe and be well.